So, not a Kingsman movie. But then, yeah, it is a Kingsman movie. But it's not, but it totally is. Yeah, let's just say it's not.
It's time for you to meet the real Agent Argyle.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And today we have Argyle. I don't think I have any Argyle in my wardrobe, so I'm trying to wear like a tropical shirt like John Cena's character did in this, so sure. Talk about an early year blockbuster that ultimately ended up being just a messy disappointment for me. So Argyle is the newest film by director Matthew Vaughn, who I've covered before on the channel and I typically seen his praises. Now granted, when I started really getting into getting these more out consistently, movie reviews I mean, this was after both Kingsman and Kingsman 2 The Golden Circle had come out. But those are the main ones that got him his start was Kingsman. And I agree. Kingsman is great. I love it. The Kingsman 2, not as good, but I still find it enjoyable. And then I guess it's a hot take, but the prequel movie that then came out, The Kingsman, I did review on my channel, and I really enjoyed that. And I think that Matthew Vaughn is, when he's hitting his stride, he's great and it's fun, and he has a certain way of making films that I enjoy as like action films. It's a stacked cast and a lot of returning familiar faces from like Kingsman and Matthew Vaughn's past filmography. But the main two, we have Bryce Dallas Howard, who definitely a well-known actress. When I think of her, the two things that come to mind for me are one, funny enough, her role in Jurassic World where she runs away from a T-Rex in heels, and also two, the fact that she's directed episodes of Mandalorian that are some of the best in the series, and she has like a really admirable respect and appreciation for the Star Wars universe and is a solid director in that field. And then you have the other protagonist, Sam Rockwell. Again, great actor, I love him. I've covered him on the channel, I'm pretty sure, but when I think of him and my favorite roles of his, I think of Jojo Rabbit, even though it's more of a minor character, or more of a major character, I think of something better like 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and his wonderful character arc in that film. But he's a delight, he's a joy, I love him. And then of course you got the man who literally you open the trailer with him and you plaster him all over it for marketing purposes, and I do love him myself, but you have Henry Cavill as the flat top Argyle titular character himself. But again, we'll get into like character performances and all that momentarily. But I'll let you know how I felt from the start, right? Because the trailer for Argyle drops and I see, oh, from the guy who brought you Kingsman. So I was like, oh, from Matthew Vaughn. Cool, I know this director. Oh my god, is he giving us something besides Kingsman? But at the same time, as the trailer is going, the vibe is pretty much similar, if not just the same, to Kingsman in terms of the music-driven, gunshot action matching the music in the trailer, and just the golds, the browns, the people like secret agents, the action, like it all just, even though it seemed like a separate movie from the Kingsman movies, it had that same vibe being carried over. So I was a little concerned, a little bit wary, but I was like, you know what, respect right here, because he just made basically 3 Kingsman movies in a row, 2 movies and a prequel. So I'm like thinking, okay, well, yeah, sure, people love that series, and there's another Kingsman sequel, a sequel prequel, if you will. And then with the cast behind it looked promising. The trailer, I didn't see much in the way of extreme hyper-violence, but it just seemed like, okay, well, woman writing these secret agent stories, and what she writes incidentally is coming true in the real world. You got Bryan Cranston as the fun little Bond-esque villain, and then you got like just a cat. There's a cat along for the ride, which is a surprisingly large amount of the marketing, is this cat flying around on their hijinks. Let's see how it is. Starting with the pros as always. The actors I put all these notes down because I saw this movie a little while ago. The actors are, quote, doing their best. For as good as the actors are, I mean, between the writing and the script, which, it isn't ass, but the script is fairly simplistic, it's rudimentary overall, but again, getting ahead of myself, the actors are fine. Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Henry Cavill, everybody acts as best as they can with what they have. I didn't really have any problem with actors or their, deliveries for the most part. Other positive, I chuckled a couple times. There were a couple times, 2 to 3 times in this movie where I went hee hee, ha ha, or perhaps
Ho ho.
and after talking about it with some of my fellow cinephiles and friends after our showing of the film, I will agree there is kind of a core message in the film that is nice. There's if you dig deep enough, a message about women in society not being confined to the roles that have already been written out for them, and instead being able to figure out they can kind of forge their own path, write their own story, that type of deal. Cool message. Technically, although I don't think it really counts, technically I give props to the director because this is him technically breaking away from Kingsman. It's not a Kingsman movie. Technically, it's not, but he's trying to do something else that's separate but similar, so props for the effort. Let's just jump right from that point to this one. It's really not a breakaway film. This feels like I'm watching a PG-13 nerfed Kingsman movie, basically. Not to mention, there's literally, I don't care about the spoilers on this, by the way, there's literally an after-credits sequence that is a literal tie-in for Kingsman. So, as far as the personal journey that I went on, I see the trailer for your new movie, Mr. Vaughn, and you're like, oh, it's a direction you know from me and the quality you have from me, but now we're making something different. It's not going to be Kingsman, but it really ultimately is going to be like one, and then ultimately tie back into it. And I feel kind of, not slighted or anything, but I just kind of find the director shot himself in the foot, because you want to show that you can do something else aside from what you're known for, but then it ultimately circles around too, and is basically another version of what you're known for. So, I don't know. I thought it was a little bit of low-key, silly subterfuge, you know what I'm saying? This almost doesn't feel right to say, but I think the movie does nerf itself with its PG-13 rating. I'm not saying that a film, has to be R to be good, or has to be violent to be good, but when you have action movies that just have the generic fighting and just the people getting punched and being "Ah, blah," and there's no blood or maybe minor scuffing, but in Kingsman, hyper violence for sure, and it really was impactful, but also it was diegetic to the narrative and made sense. But this one just had that generic fisticuffs and shooting, but nobody really, people are going down, but you're not really seeing the more gruesome side of it. I don't know, there's just a lot of implied violence in this one. That and the lack of profanity in the dialogue. I'm not saying it has to be this filthy, depraved slog through cinema, but all the trimmings of what a Matthew Vaughn joint is known for, and even though at first he advertises it as something different from Kingsman, it technically is still a Kingsman movie and has the same vibe and tonality to it, but with a lower rating, and so therefore it packs less of a punch and is not as impactful. So I get it, you want to sell more tickets, you want to appeal to more audiences with the PG-13. Sure, I personally think it was a misstep. I got into not a argument, but a debate with some friends about the movie, the reason why Kingsman works so well for what it is, right? I hate to keep drawing on it, but we kind of have to for the sake of this conversation. It makes fun of the tropes in spy movies while also still pulling tropes from them, but also eventually then subverting expectations and twisting around and subverting some tropes and not falling victim to them. But it is a commentary on the spy thriller genre while also innovating. And that's great. I like that formula, and a lot of people did too. And this one, if it was trying to also do the same thing, I would give it more of a pass, but when the movie starts, it starts with what you see in the trailer, which, by the way, in terms of what Dua Lipa or or John Cena being involved in this film, barely. Even Henry Cavill a few times throughout the film, but still barely. These spy sequences are happening, and you know that it's part of, her book, right? That's fine. So their dialogue is going to be purposefully cheesy and bad jokes, paperback writing that sells all the copies, and that's fine. But then we cut to the real world, and people are basically still talking like that, same tone and cadence, especially when the spy stuff gets involved, simplistic dialogue and story and narrative elements and beats, and I'm like, oh no, we're not really doing anything here. And it'd be one thing if they were once again taking these things and making fun and poking fun at that spy thriller genre, and then subverting expectations or turning things in their head, but it's not. Instead, it's just like doubling down, and it's just being that, and that's the movie, and that just doesn't work for me. It's not enjoyable. Direction is fine. It's a bit shakier than his other films because he's trying to have to, in editing, to make things seem less violent and to try to avoid a higher, worse rating. You kind of have to like be more vague about what happens to people on screen. You can't show as much blood, violence, or, you know, bullets or knives connecting, so you kind of have to be a bit shakier, be a bit more vague. Whenever there's big ongoing action, it's just big sweeping shots and follows, and that's okay, I guess. Nothing too crazy. The actors are doing what they can with what they have, just because the script for this film, I think, is just, it's not like a terrible, like piss poor script, but it's not good. It's just simplistic. Everything's just a simple script, simple dialogue, characters just saying obvious things to each other, and just then when people are acting on screen, it's just kind of like very silly decisions being made. Bad guys go down in stupid ways because they all just are kind of like cartoon characters, I guess. People aren't the brightest in this film, and it takes a while for people to figure stuff out. The action, I mean, it's fine, but it gets to a point and you're like, okay, I'm really gonna have to turn my brain off here for the final third act. It's, again, people being very silly, and there's obvious solutions for both good guys and bad guys being presented that for some inexplicable reason, nobody takes the easy way out, nobody takes the smart way out. Music's fine, nothing extraordinary. Effects, beginning has some really not great CGI, and I don't know, like throughout the movie the effects are fine. The end gets really messy, and it clearly CG and popcorn flick by the end of the movie. Dumb action, fine. The more I talk about the movie, the more I'm probably going to just keep poo-pooing on it, but I definitely had a bit of a debate in the parking lot about whether this film was trying to do what it did on purpose or not. If it was doing it on purpose and was trying to say something, why try to be something besides Kingsman? Instead, it just doubled down. I didn't get like subversion from this, like, oh, you know, this was a film that was actually trying to say this but was actually doing that. I'm like, no, it both said and did this, and I don't think it did it well. Audiences, I don't know about audiences, but I know critics really didn't like this film, and you know what? I gotta kind of side with him on this one. Probably my least favorite of Matthew Vaughn's works. I like the director. I like all the Kingsman movies, but he just seems to be stuck in that rut himself. Like, he's typecast himself as a director in this way, like thematically and visually, a narrative standpoint. I don't know. I mean, a couple people that I went to go see it with did have enjoyment they gleaned from this film, and this film has a lot of things that you could like from it, but for me, between the quality of a film, I think it does more wrong than it does right, and my personal enjoyment, I was just kind of existing in the film. I was pretty bored throughout all of it. Argyle, I would chalk up to a high 2 out of 5. Like a high 2 out of 5. Not even, just more disappointing than anything. Just a disappointment. That's all I gotta say about Argyle. Thank you guys and gals so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode, whatever I make. And goodbye, travelers.